In September 2000, two men flew to Dallas to sell their tiny, money-losing startup. They walked into Blockbuster's headquarters, 27th floor, glass table, a company worth $6 billion, and offered it to the most powerful man in home entertainment. The price? $50 million. The CEO of Blockbuster listened, nodded, and, in the words of the man pitching him, tried not to laugh. He said no. That startup was Netflix, and that no is the most expensive word ever spoken in the history of entertainment. This is how a 9,000-store empire wrecked itself. And it wasn't because they were too dumb to see the future. It's stranger than that. To understand how big the fall was, you have to remember how big Blockbuster got. It started in 1985. One store, in Dallas, opened by a software entrepreneur named David Cook. Within a decade, it wasn't a store, it was a ritual. Friday night in America was Blockbuster. You walked the aisles, you argued over what to rent, you touched the box. By its peak, the company ran roughly 9,000 stores, employed around 60,000 people, and pulled in about $6 billion a year. In 1994, media giant Viacom bought it for $8.5 billion. But here's the engine under the hood, the detail that explains everything that went wrong. Blockbuster didn't just make money renting movies. It made a fortune when you brought them back late. By some estimates, late fees generated around $800 million a year. Customers hated them so much that dozens of states took Blockbuster to court over them. Sit with that. A company whose single most profitable product was your annoyance. That kind of money is a drug, and it's very, very hard to walk away from your best customer's worst experience, even when your life depends on it. While Blockbuster was counting late fees, a very different company was being built in California. 1997. Two founders, Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph. Their idea was almost boring. Rent DVDs by mail, a subscription, no due dates, and the part that mattered most, no late fees. The legend Hastings likes to tell is that Netflix was born out of a $40 late fee on a Blockbuster rental. Whether that story is exactly true or a little too perfect, it points at something real. Everyone hated the fees. Netflix was, in a sense, the anti-Blockbuster, engineered to remove the one thing Blockbuster made the most money on. By 2000, the dot-com bubble was bursting. Netflix was small, unprofitable, and bleeding cash. So Hastings and Randolph did the sensible thing. They went to their giant competitor and offered to join forces. Netflix would run Blockbuster's online arm. Blockbuster would run the stores. And Blockbuster could own the whole thing for $50 million. Across the table sat John Antioco. And to be fair to him, in that room, in that moment, it did look like a joke. A cash-burning DVD startup, in the middle of a tech crash, asking a $6 billion empire for $50 million. Antioco thought the internet frenzy was overblown. On the biggest point, he was even right. The bubble did burst. So he passed. The Netflix guys walked out crushed, imagining every one of those 60,000 Blockbuster employees laughing at them. Here's the thing nobody says out loud. Turning down Netflix in 2000 was not the mistake that killed Blockbuster. Not even close. The real wreck came later, and it came from inside the building. Fast forward a few years. Antioco has woken up. He can see Netflix growing, and to his credit, he moves hard. In 2004, Blockbuster launches its own online service. In 2005, he does the unthinkable. He starts killing the late fees. Then comes total access, rent online, return in store. And it works. Subscribers pour in. For a real moment, Blockbuster is out-competing Netflix at its own game. But dropping late fees meant walking away from around $400 million a year. And that terrified exactly the wrong person. Enter Carl Icahn, one of the most feared activist investors in America. By 2005, he'd taken a big stake and 3 board seats, and he did not like Antioco's plan. To Icahn, the online push was a money pit, and the late fees were sacred. He wanted the profit now. The two went to war, and unbelievably, the fight that decided the fate of the company wasn't really about strategy. It came to a head over Antioco's bonus, around $7.5 million. The board sided with the investors. In early 2007, the CEO, who was actually beating Netflix, walked out the door. His replacement came from 7-Eleven, a convenience store operator brought in to cut costs and please Wall Street. He did exactly what he was hired to do. He gutted the online investment. He refocused on the stores. He brought the late fees back. And when asked about Netflix, he was famously unbothered. It simply wasn't on his radar. Then 2008 hit. The financial crisis froze the credit markets, and Blockbuster was sitting on roughly $1 billion of debt it now couldn't refinance. The company that had been winning 2 years earlier was suddenly a giant with no cash and no future. In September 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. Reed Hastings later admitted the quiet part. If it hadn't been for that debt, he said, Blockbuster could have killed them. In 2011, the satellite company Dish bought what was left of the brand for a few $100 million. By 2013, the last corporate stores went dark. Even Icahn eventually called Blockbuster the worst investment he ever made. Today, exactly 1 Blockbuster store is left on Earth. A single franchise in Bend, Oregon, kept alive as a museum to a world we lost. And the easy lesson, the one every other video will give you, is Blockbuster failed to adapt. But that's wrong. That's the comfortable version, because Blockbuster did adapt. Antioco saw it, moved on it, and was winning. The company didn't die because it couldn't imagine the future. It died because 2 things wouldn't let it survive long enough to reach that future: a mountain of debt and a boardroom that would rather protect this quarter's profit than next decade's company. That's the real wreck. Blockbuster wasn't beaten by Netflix. It was beaten by its own balance sheet and a fight over a bonus. The trend was never the killer. The trend is never the killer. What kills empires is being too leveraged and too short-sighted to act on what they can already clearly see. They could have owned Netflix for $50 million. Netflix today is worth $290 billion, with a B. But even that number isn't the lesson. The lesson is that Blockbuster had a second chance, a working plan, and a winning hand, and traded it all for one more good quarter. Every empire eventually wrecks. The only question is whether it's pushed or whether it jumps. If this one got you, subscribe. Next time, we're opening the case file on the company that invented the future and then buried it to protect its own past. Kodak.